Okay, so today we are going to have a look at exam style questions on simplifying surds. So whenever we simplify surds, we are going to be looking for square numbers that are factors of the numbers under the square root. So it's normally a good idea to start just by writing down your square numbers, just so you have them there for reference. So 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64. And generally in an A-level exam, they tend not to go over 64. Yet it's unlikely that they'll go over 25, but we like to cover our bases. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at questions of the style where we have several different surd terms. So for example, 3 root 8 plus 5 root 32 minus 6 over root 2. Now, when I answer questions like this, what I like to do to try and keep things neat is to take each of these terms individually and simplify them separately. So I'll start with the 3 root 8, and what I'm going to do is to have a look at the number under the square root sign and see if there's a square number that is a factor of it. So you can see that 4 is a factor of 8, so these can be written as 3 lots of root 4, so 8 is 4 times 2, so this can be written, root 8 can be written as root 4 times root 2. Now because we know that root 4 is 2, this is now 3 times 2 times root 2, which is 6 root 2. Okay, if we take the second term, which is 5 root 32. Now there's no guarantee with this, but the likelihood is that if you are left with a root 2 in the first term, you'll probably be left with a root 2 in the second term. So if I look at 32 and see if 2 is a factor, it is. 2 goes into 32 16 times, and 16 is a square number. So we can write this as 5 times, so we have root 16 multiplied by root 2. Again, 16 times 2 is 32. But because we know the square root of 16 is 4, this is 5 times 4 times root 2, which is 20 root 2. And then the third term, which is 6 over root 2. Okay, so when we have a surd on the bottom, we'd like to rationalize the denominator. And if it's a simple term like this with just one square root on the bottom, then the way we do that is by taking the surd and we multiply top and bottom by the denominator. So this gives us 6 times root 2 is 6 root 2. And root 2 times root 2, well, when you multiply something by itself, it's called squaring. So when you square a square root, it cancels out. So root 2 squared is going to be 2. And then this simplifies because 6 divided by 2 is 3, so we get 3 root 2. Okay, all of these are now simplified, so it's just a case of answering the question now. So the question was 3 root 8 plus 5 root 32 minus 6 over root 2. So if we rewrite this, we have 3 root 8, we've said is the same as having 6 root 2, plus 5 root 32 is 20 root 2, and minus 6 over root 2 is 3 root 2. So we're left with, just move the camera down a second, we're left with 6 plus 20 is 26, take away 3 is 23 root 2. And this is now simplified. Okay, if we try another question. So we'll try root 20 plus root 35 over root 7 minus 20 over root 5. Okay, so if I start with the first term, root 20, so I look for the square number that goes into 20. Well, 4 goes into 20 5 times. So root 20 is the same as root 4 times root 5, and the square root of 4 is 2, so this is 2 root 5. Okay, root 35 over root 7. Now the temptation on this is to treat it the same as the 6 over root 2, because you have a single square root on the bottom. However, if you do this, it will still work, but you're making life a little more complicated than you need to for yourself. You need to remember here that if you're dividing two square roots, that's the same as having the square root of the fraction. Oops, sorry, that should be 35. So 35 over 7. And 35 over 7 is 5, so this is the same as the square root of 5. Doing it this way is a lot easier than multiplying root 35 by root 7, which you would have to do if you followed the same process that you did here. And the final one, 20 over root 5. Oops, sorry. 20 over root 5, we're going to multiply top and bottom by root 5. So you have 20 times root 5 on the top, which is 20 root 5. And on the bottom, root 5 times root 5 is 5. And then 20 divided by 5 is 4, so this is 4 root 5. And then we just answer our question. So root 20 plus root 35 over root 7 minus 20 over root 5. Well, we know that root 20 is 2 root 5 plus root 35 over root 7 is root 5. Now there's no number in front of this square root sign, which means that there's one of them, so you can fill it in if you want to, but you don't need to. Then it's subtract 20 over root 5 is 4 root 5. So we have 2 root 5 plus 1 root 5 is 3 root 5. Take away 4 root 5 is minus 1 root 5, or minus root 5. And that is simplified.